The morning sunlight hit my apartment just right, spilling across the polished oak floor and glinting off the glass of my desk. I smoothed my silk blouse, feeling the soft fabric against my skin, and took a deep breath, savoring the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee that lingered in the air. My phone buzzed, a sharp vibration against the marble countertop, and I picked it up with a practiced hand. A message from my mother. "Don't forget graduation day tomorrow. Your sister is so proud of you, sweetie." I stared at it for a moment, letting a quiet smile tug at my lips. Proud of me. They had funded every cent of my sister's degree, while I'd navigated loans, part-time jobs, and late-night shifts alone. I didn't hate them. Not exactly. But the sting of being overlooked, of being expected to fend for myself, still lingered like an echo. I glanced out the window at the city skyline, imagining the life I'd quietly built while they assumed I was struggling. My office, my achievements, the small victories nobody knew about, they were mine. All mine. And tomorrow, they'd see just a fraction of what that meant. I tucked my phone into my pocket, feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and pride. Graduation day wasn't just a ceremony. It was a reckoning, a chance for me to show them that independence isn't weakness, and that sometimes paying your own way builds a stronger foundation than any handout ever could. I remember the day it all became painfully clear. I was 17, clutching a thick stack of college brochures, my hands trembling as I faced my parents in the living room. My sister, Emma, lounged on the couch, flipping through a magazine, completely unaware of the storm brewing around me. "Mom, Dad, I've been accepted into the program," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I just need some help with tuition." My mother's gaze flicked over me, polite but distant, and my father sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. "You know how much we've invested in Emma's education. Maybe you should consider a state school instead," my father said. There it was, the unspoken truth I had known but hoped I was imagining. I was expected to figure it out myself. A lump rose in my throat. My chest tightened. I felt the sting of rejection, as if I'd been slapped, the kind that leaves your entire body trembling. I wanted to scream, to beg, to throw myself on the floor and demand fairness, but I didn't. I just nodded, fighting back tears, and left the room. Later that evening, I sat on my bedroom floor, brochures scattered like fallen leaves around me. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. "Sometimes, darling, the world won't hand you what you deserve. You take it, piece by piece, with your own hands. That's how you know it's yours." I clutched the small silver locket she had given me last Christmas, its cool surface pressing against my palm, grounding me. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a reminder that I could survive, that I could carve my own path even if the people who were supposed to support me didn't. By the next week, I had a plan. I applied for scholarships, took on extra shifts at the cafe down the street, and learned to budget every dollar with precision. It was scary, exhausting, and sometimes humiliating, but with every paycheck, every scholarship notification, I felt a sense of independence I had never known. That period of my life shaped me. I learned resilience, the quiet strength that comes from fighting for your own future. And even though I still longed for my parents' approval, I realized that paying my own way wasn't a punishment. It was the first step toward discovering what I was truly capable of. Balancing college, part-time jobs, and my own dreams was like walking a tightrope over a stormy ocean. I worked at the cafe in the mornings, tutored high school students in the afternoons, and stayed up late into the night studying or taking online courses. Every dollar I earned went toward tuition, books, and rent, and I watched every penny with the scrutiny of a hawk. Some nights, exhaustion felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, but I refused to give up. It was during one of those late-night study sessions that I met Miss Parker, a visiting lecturer at my university. She noticed the notebooks crammed with ideas, charts, and scribbles, and she asked, "Do you have plans beyond graduation?" Her question wasn't casual. It was probing, encouraging. For the first time, someone saw me not as a struggling student, but as a potential force. Under her mentorship, I learned not just to survive, but to thrive. She taught me about financial planning, networking, and self-confidence. She showed me that independence didn't have to mean isolation. It could mean empowerment. With her guidance, I landed my first freelance client, a small business that needed a social media strategy. The thrill of signing my first contract, negotiating my own rates, and delivering results was intoxicating. There were setbacks, of course. Some clients didn't pay on time, my schedule became chaotic, and there were nights I cried into my pillow, wondering if I could really make it. But slowly, the pieces started falling into place. I launched my own consultancy, finding small wins that compounded into meaningful progress. My first profitable month, my first recurring client, the first time I paid my rent without counting every cent. Through it all, I kept my family in the dark. On social media, I posted generic updates, the occasional selfie, a coffee mug captioned with hustle mode, nothing that revealed the scope of my accomplishments. I didn't want their pity or approval. I wanted them to see me, someday, fully formed and unstoppable. Every milestone, every achievement, became a quiet rebellion against the assumption that I couldn't do it alone. I built a life on my own terms, a life of purpose, ambition, and autonomy. My apartment, modest but elegant, reflected my personality. Art I loved, furniture I saved for months to afford, books stacked in haphazard towers that chronicled every lesson learned. It wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving to myself that independence could be beautiful and that self-reliance could lead to a life richer than any handout could provide. I was still that same young woman who had trembled before rejection, but now I was tempered, stronger, and quietly preparing for the moment the world, or at least my family, would finally see. Graduation day arrived, bright and crisp, with the kind of sunlight that made everything glimmer. I arrived early, not out of nerves, but to settle into the rhythm of the day, to remind myself that this moment wasn't about them. It was about me. My parents and sister were already there, seated in the front row, faces bright with expectation. They thought they were coming to celebrate a struggling, grateful daughter. What they didn't know was how much I had accomplished on my own. The auditorium buzzed with chatter, students and families settling into their seats, the scent of fresh flowers and polished wood filling the air. I adjusted my blazer, feeling the subtle weight of my confidence. I had rehearsed my speech, yes, but more than that, I had rehearsed how I wanted them to see me. Not as the girl who had struggled to pay tuition, but as the woman who had thrived despite it. As my name was called, I walked across the stage with steady steps. My eyes met my mother's, and I noticed the brief flicker of surprise. She had expected fatigue, perhaps even a hint of defeat. My father's jaw tightened slightly, and Emma smiled, oblivious to the layers of determination behind my poised exterior. When I delivered my speech, I spoke not only about gratitude for the teachers and friends who had supported me, but subtly about the power of independence and perseverance. Sometimes, I said, glancing briefly at my family, the most important lessons aren't the ones given to you, but the ones you take for yourself. The skills, the resilience, the courage, you earn them on your own. After the ceremony, my family followed me to the small reception I had organized, expecting modest decorations and polite conversation. Instead, they stepped into my apartment-style event space, a room curated with taste, elegance, and evidence of a life built with intention. Expensive art lined the walls, my consultancy's awards glimmered on the shelves, and tables displayed books and projects that chronicled my journey. For a moment, they just looked, absorbing details that spoke louder than any words could. I let the silence stretch, enjoying the pause, savoring their disbelief. Then I spoke. Mom, Dad, Emma, I wanted you to see it all today. This, I gestured around the room, is what I've built on my own. My degree, my business, my clients, my apartment, it's mine. Paid for without a single cent from you. Their reactions were instantaneous and varied. My mother's lips parted in shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. My father's brow furrowed as if he were trying to reconcile the image of the confident woman before him with the struggling girl he remembered. Emma's jaw dropped, and for once, she was speechless. I let them process, letting the weight of my words settle. Then I added, quietly, with a trace of irony, I'm proud of Emma, truly. But I wanted you to understand. Independence has its own rewards, and sometimes, paying your own way teaches you more than any gift ever could. The room was thick with emotion, awe, guilt, shame, admiration. I watched as they shifted in their seats, their eyes scanning the space, taking in the tangible proof of my hidden success. I didn't need them to apologize, or even to fully understand. I just wanted them to see. And finally they did. After letting them absorb the room, I stepped closer, feeling the shift in energy. I had always been quiet about my achievements, letting my work speak for itself. But now the conversation needed clarity. I wasn't seeking revenge, but I was claiming my power, and they needed to understand that. I've built this life without anyone footing the bills for me, I said, my voice steady but firm. And that independence comes with boundaries. I can support, guide, and share knowledge, but only if respect, accountability, and effort are part of the equation. My mother opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. Listen, if you want to be part of my life in the future, these are the conditions. First, I turned to my parents. No more comparisons. No more subtle dismissals. Emma is amazing, and she deserves your pride, but I'm not her and I don't need your approval in the ways I once did. Celebrate her without diminishing me. I saw their faces tighten, but I didn't flinch. Then I addressed Emma. If you want guidance or mentorship from me, it has to be earned. I'm happy to teach you, but you need to show initiative, respect for your own work, and an understanding that success requires effort, not expectation. I added conditions for all of us. We would practice honesty, no excuses, no pretending that effort and independence weren't necessary. We would acknowledge past mistakes without letting them define the future. And most importantly, they would recognize that I am capable, confident, and deserving of autonomy. I could see the shift in their demeanor. My parents, used to traditional hierarchies and old dynamics, were uncomfortably aware of the power balance. Emma, for once, looked reflective instead of dismissive. And me? I felt a calm certainty, a sense of control I had never known in my family interactions. This wasn't punishment. It wasn't an ultimatum meant to hurt. It was a blueprint for respect and growth, emotional, personal, and professional. Compassion and firmness intertwined naturally. I cared for them, truly, but I would no longer bend to patterns that diminished me. My life was mine to navigate, and anyone in it had to meet me there, not demand that I return to a place I had already outgrown. As I finished, I saw understanding flicker in their eyes, mixed with hesitation and awe. They were processing the power dynamics they had underestimated for years. I let the moment linger, savoring the balance of authority and care, pride and humility, all harmonized by the silent lesson they had been given. Independence is not just survival, it is strength. For the first time, I felt fully seen, not for what I had endured, but for what I had built. And the best part? The conditions I set weren't about control, they were about growth. If they accepted them, we could move forward. If not, that was their choice, not mine. Weeks passed after graduation, and slowly, I began to see change. My parents, once distant and distracted by expectations, started checking in differently. Conversations were no longer laced with comparison or unspoken criticism. They asked about my projects, genuinely curious, and even offered advice without judgment. Emma, too, shifted. She reached out for guidance on her own career, eager to learn rather than compete. I realized that my insistence on boundaries hadn't pushed them away. It had invited them to grow, to meet me where I was. Independence, I learned, didn't have to isolate. It could inspire change in others as well. One evening, I found myself holding the small silver locket my grandmother had given me years ago, the one that had grounded me during my darkest days. I traced the delicate engravings with my finger and smiled, remembering her words. Sometimes, darling, the world won't hand you what you deserve. You take it, piece by piece, with your own hands. The journey had been long, painful, and beautiful. Every struggle, every sleepless night, Every rejection had led to this, a life I had claimed, nurtured, and expanded entirely on my own terms. And now, I could share it with my family without compromising who I had become. I sat by the window one evening, city lights flickering below, and reflected on how far I had come. The girl who had trembled at the thought of asking for help had grown into a woman who knew her worth and demanded respect, not as an act of defiance, but as a declaration of self-respect. Graduation had been more than a ceremony. It was a milestone, a reckoning, and a celebration of independence. I had paid my way through, yes, but in doing so, I had built a foundation stronger than any gift could provide. My life was proof that resilience, courage, and unwavering belief in oneself could create something extraordinary. And as I closed the locket and placed it back around my neck, I whispered to myself, almost like a mantra, I earned this. I am enough. And now, I am unstoppable.